This is about defending democracy. This is no longer Democrats versus Republicans. What do you want your kids to believe in? There must be give and take.
This is White Flag with Joe Walsh.
I found the reaction to be so disappointing, so disjointing. Like I felt such a disconnect all this past weekend in the reaction of the shooting that happened down in Texas in a small town outside of Houston. I'm sure you heard about it. This past Friday night, a guy killed, walked across into his neighbor's house and executed 5 people, including 2 children, 3 adults and 2 children. As of this recording, late Sunday, the killer has not yet been apprehended. You know the story. You've heard the story. The killer is shooting his gun in his backyard, shooting at shit or shooting up in the air. The neighbor shouts across the fence, "There are children trying to sleep in the house. Could you please stop shooting your gun?" This killer then proceeded to, with his gun, walk to the neighbor's house, enter the house, and execution style kill all 5 people in the house, 3 adults and 2 children, because they complained that he was making noise shooting the gun off in his backyard. An amazingly depraved, grotesque, just sick thing to do. You're shooting your gun in your backyard. A neighbor asks you to stop because people are sleeping, children are sleeping. And you then go and kill everybody in the house who just asked you to stop shooting your gun. Almost, and I say almost beyond belief, that any human being could be so bad, could be so evil, to react like that. 2 of the adults killed, and they were all killed, the adults and the children all executed. Execution style. They were all shot and killed above the shoulders, at close range, above the neck. 2 of the women killed were killed laying on top of their children, protecting their children from the gunfire. Just a horrible story. But immediately, the reaction to this event down in Texas this past Friday night, the reaction to this event from everybody on the left was about the gun that this sick, evil, depraved individual used. It was weird. I mean, it happens all the time whenever there's a mass shooting in America. But this was so atypical of, the typical mass shooting that we hear about, where somebody in a calculated fashion walks into a school or walks into a movie theater or walks into a hospital or wherever, and they've been planning this for a while, and they've got some long resentful beef or whatever to get off of their chest, and they kill people. The typical mass shooting. This was publicly very atypical. A neighbor gets pissed off that a neighbor asked him to be quiet, and so he shoots and kills everybody in that house, in his neighbor's house. I will add that this is much more typical and common of mass shootings in this country, the vast majority of which are domestic in nature, the vast majority of which are committed against people that the killer knows. But mass shootings, as our media portrays, this was a different one, strange one. But the reaction immediately was all focused on, by the left, all focused on the gun used. It was an AR-15. It was a semi-automatic long gun. He was shooting a semi-automatic long gun in his backyard. He used that semi-automatic long gun then to go to the neighbor's house and kill everybody. The AR-15. The boogeyman for the left, the so-called assault rifle, the assault weapons that need to be banned. And maybe that's why the reaction was so overwhelming on the left to right away go after the gun, the type of gun. Maybe it's because it was a semi-automatic long gun. Maybe it's because it was an AR-15. I mean, if the killer had used a semi-automatic handgun and killed and executed his 5 neighbors, I don't think the focus would have been on the type of gun if it were a semi-automatic handgun. It would have been just on guns in general. We've got a gun problem in general. We got to get rid of guns in general. We got to ban guns in general. We've got to restrict usage of guns in general. But because it was an AR-15 this guy used, that was the entire focus. And I found it really disconcerting and bizarre. Like here's another example of a problem with AR-15s. Excuse me, with behavior as bizarre as this, as bizarrely evil as this, you shoot and kill your neighbors because they asked you to be quiet. You take that, you take an incident like that, and you focus on the AR-15 instead of focusing on how demented and evil this behavior is. Like, I woke up Saturday morning when I read about this past weekend. I was so disturbed by the act, by this action. It's like it hit closer to home that a neighbor can just go off like that. To me, it had nothing to do with a gun or guns. It would be like a neighbor's playing loud music. You've got children sleeping in your house. You ask your neighbor to turn down his loud music so your kids can sleep. Your neighbor then grabs a big butcher knife, comes over to your house, and hacks everybody to death in the house. And pick your weapon. It's just such strange behavior that it seemed odd to me and really wrong that we use an incident like this to say, oh my God, America has a gun problem. Excuse me. Excuse me. Neighbor asks you to be quiet and you kill everybody in the house? And that's a gun problem? That's boy, I'll tell you, that's an evil problem. That's a mental health problem. We got a sickness problem. We got an anger problem. And look, I don't know yet, and it doesn't matter who this guy is. I mean, some people are saying he was an illegal immigrant. He'd been here illegally. He was a Mexican national. Don't know. Doesn't matter for the point I'm making. To behave like this, like screams out to me like we got other kind of big problems in this country besides an AR-15 or a gun. And I know what you're going to say to me. You're going to say, but Joe, okay, he was bad, evil, sick. Yeah, it's horrible, terrible, like bizarre behavior, but he had access to a gun. And so he used the gun to kill his neighbors. I guess what I'm saying is this guy had something going on inside him that was so bad and so evil that he would have hopped across that fence and used anything to kill his neighbors who asked him to be quiet. And it just seems to me like that's the red flag. And that's where the focus should be. Speaking of red flags, turns out Texas doesn't have a red flag law. The ability of family or law enforcement to come in and remove a gun temporarily from someone if the family or law enforcement believes that person is a threat to himself or others. Turns out this guy shooting a gun in his backyard had been called in a few times before for doing the same thing. Texas doesn't have a red flag law. If Texas had a red flag law, it could have maybe gone a long way to getting a gun out of this guy's hands. But again, I go back to this. I found the reaction kind of like on the left to this shooting, really like kind of automatic, rote, and almost tone deaf. To immediately focus on it was an AR-15. We need to get rid of AR-15s. When on a Friday night in this country, a neighbor asked another neighbor to be quiet. And because of that, the neighbor who was asked to be quiet killed everybody in the neighbor's house. Hello, oh my God, there's something else going on. But look, that's where we are. I guess that's what hit home to me, that it doesn't matter the particulars of any of these shootings. The reaction from a certain percentage of Americans will always be on the gun and solely on the gun. And I say that recognizing that there's a certain percentage of the American population whose reaction will always be on everything but the gun. This one was a really weird, strange action that to me demanded that we as a society look elsewhere besides just at a gun. But I know I'm probably shouting in the wind right now. Thank you for listening. Joe Walsh, this is White Flag with Joe Walsh. Listen to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple. Please do me a favor, subscribe to my YouTube page. It doesn't cost a thing. It's free. White Flag with Joe Walsh. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter at Walsh Freedom. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, all of that good stuff. Spread the word about this podcast. Got lots of good stuff coming up this week. A couple of really good, interesting conversations. Hope your week is off to a good start. Wish you nothing but the best. God bless and be. Hey, Joe Walsh here. Since the beginning of time, man has sought land. Wars fought, treaties signed, marriages arranged, continents traversed, all in the eternal pursuit of land. But you don't have to go through any of that nonsense. Just get on governmentauction.com and bid against other people interested in surplus land in states all over the country: California, Wyoming, Colorado, Florida, just to name a few. It's all there at governmentauction.com. If you're the winning bidder, you don't need to go through any credit checks. You just make a few down payments and keep monthly payments going for a few years, and the land is yours. And while you're making payments, you can use the land just like you would if you owned it. And it's easy to sign up and start bidding on something that catches your eye. Go to governmentauction.com. It takes less than 5 minutes. governmentauction.com.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, share, and follow White Flag with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been White Flag with Joe Walsh.